you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you all for coming out on a lousy night. I appreciate the interest. And I'm going to start with, well, I have to start with an apology, first of all, and that is that I had to stand up there and they had to turn that video off because that was pretty good. Now, does everybody know what that was?
That was the 1966 World Series between the Los Angeles Dodgers and the Orioles, and we swept a 4-game series from them without letting the Dodgers win any of the games at all.
That is correct. And very, very famous. I've never seen that in color. So that it's colorized or something. Very, very famous moment in Baltimore baseball history. Just value added right there. That's pretty cool. I was excited to see that. And I'll start, that's the apology. The admission is, when that happened in 1966, I didn't live here. I was a little kid growing up in Texas. And, you know, I was didn't even have Major League Baseball in Texas then. I was a Dallas Cowboy fan. Don't hit me. I was. And so anyway, that's where I was from a distance. The Orioles, it turns out, were my favorite team. They were on TV. You could watch them. Brooks Robinson was from Arkansas. I was pretty close to Texas. And so I did like the Orioles. But then I went on, you know, grew up and went to college and started into journalism, sports journalism. I worked in Dallas, my hometown, for 5 years, covering high school football and then college football, then professional basketball. And then the Baltimore Sun hired me in 1984. And it wasn't a job, well, first of all, 1984, a very interesting year to come to Baltimore. The previous fall, the Orioles won the World Series. All right? And the previous, within months before I came here, the Colts left. Okay, so you know, I'd grown up like any sports fan, you know, knowing that Baltimore was a great baseball town and a great football town, or had been. So the Colts are gone. I walk into the sports department of the Baltimore Sun. There's no more football. And so my job, I was never a beat writer of a team. I was a feature writer for a couple years, and then I was a columnist. I was in the role they wanted for me was opinion. Went everywhere, went around. It was the glory days of newspapers. They sent me all over the world. You know, Olympics, World Cup of Soccer, just all the major sports events. You know, was just go and write what you thought, what your opinion was. It was a great job, no question about it. But of course, the most important stuff for any reader waking up in Baltimore was what's going on with my teams, right? What's happening in Baltimore. So, and football, let me repeat, no football team here. It's pretty hard to imagine. So the Orioles were here, and they were huge. I had some colleagues there, and one of them said one time, if I wake up in the morning and think about what am I going to write a column about today, I'd be hard-pressed to come up with anything that would be more read than a column about the Orioles. And this is in the mid to late 80s. The team that I walked into in Baltimore in 1984, coming off a World Series, had been great for so many years. It was baseball royalty, no question about it, years and years of success. So within a couple of years of my arriving, they start to decline, okay? They just start. So maybe it's my fault, I don't know. But anyway, I tell you, it didn't matter in the newspaper business. I'm covering them because they were the only team we had. These are the last years of Memorial Stadium, and the fans were so used to winning, and so I went out there night after night, you know, and wrote opinion, various things, made people happy, made people sad, got a lot of bad mail. I mean, that's sort of the way it is and was in the newspaper business back then. But so I became familiar with the Orioles, got to know the Orioles. Brooks Robinson was in the media. He was an announcer on the games on Channel 2. So I walk in right away. I start writing for the Sun. I'm at in the press box, and there's Brooks Robinson sitting with me at the table where you eat beforehand, and he shakes my hand, start talking, just the nicest fella ever. And so, and then I go to spring training, and you start to meet guys. They come around. Actually, Earl Weaver had retired before I left, and he came back and managed the team for a year and a half. So I got to know Earl, and you just start to know these guys. Frank Robinson was a coach. And then, of course, the infamous year of 1988, when, who remembers what happened that year? 0-21. So I was there for about 18 of them. So talk about, a challenge on what to write. It actually did become sort of one of the most amazing things I've ever covered. It's almost impossible to lose 21 Major League Baseball games in a row. Yeah. So anyway, but I was also there the night when they had broken the streak, and they came home to play. I can't remember who they were playing when they came home, but Memorial Stadium was sold out. And that was the night that William Donald Schaefer went out to the mound and announced that there was going to be a new ballpark at Camden Yards. So he said that from the pitcher's mound. So that slowly but surely ushers in the next era of Oriole baseball. They eventually moved to Camden Yards. And from the minute they were at Camden Yards, they're a huge success in many respects. The stadium is sold out every night. I think for the first 5 or 6 years, you could barely get a ticket to an Oriole baseball game. And the teams were good. They actually, when Davy Johnson was here, Peter Angelos became the owner. Actually, the first years of that era were pretty good. They were in the playoffs in 1996. They probably should have been in the World Series in 1997 and didn't make it. But it was, in print, I used to refer to it as the city of the baseball monster because it was a monster. People came in here, crowds, the stadium's full. It was a great place to play baseball. And of course, it was the era of Cal Ripken's consecutive game streak and the 21-31 and all that. So I get to the late 90s, and I had been writing for The Sun, writing a lot of columns for The Sun. I started writing books. And I had written a book about a Kentucky Derby winner. It was my first book. And then I wrote a book about growing up in Dallas in the 1960s as a Cowboy fan. And so I had started writing books. It was while I was working for the newspaper. I was looking for another subject. And right in front of me is a sold-out ballpark and a team with a great history. And I thought, I'm going to do an oral history of the Baltimore Orioles. There's never been one done. And so I found a publisher. That was great. I set out to do this. It's a huge project. And what an oral history is, of course, is I'm not doing as much writing. I'm interviewing people for their memories of what happened, their recollections, and I'm letting them do the talking for the most part. So in 1999, I set out basically to interview every person who'd ever done anything for the Orioles to that point who was still alive and would talk to me. And so it became a great search mission, a great trip basically across America. At the time, I was sort of cavalier about it. I was a young sports writer. I was used to going around talking to famous people. Didn't really bother me. I look at it now, years later, what a journey this was. Just an unbelievable thing. I went to, I'll tell you about a few of these trips I took. I took a trip to Las Vegas and to Arizona. All right, and again, I'm just trying to get as many Oriole figures from the past as I can. Players, managers, front office people. In Arizona, I found Harry Dalton, the general manager of the team when they were at their very best in the 1960s, living in retirement in a beautiful hillside home overlooking Phoenix. I found the Arizona Fall League is a sort of a league for prospects. Where they send players, each team sends players. Frank Robinson was retired from baseball, the president of the Arizona Fall League that fall. I knew Frank from when he worked when he was the manager of the team. I said, I'm going to come out, can we sit and talk? He said, sure. So at a game, an Arizona Fall League game in a little minor league stadium. I sat in the press box, a little open-air press box with Frank Robinson, and talked for 2 hours about his career in Baltimore and everything that went on. I interviewed Eddie Murray, was a manager of one of the Arizona Fall League teams. That was a tricky one. Eddie was not a big fan of the media. And let me tell you, I was in the crosshairs. And he flat out didn't like me. But anyway, through the team, I said, can I at least meet him in the dugout before the game and see how this goes? And the guy said, sure. So he comes out of the dugout, he looks at me and he goes, now what are we doing here? And I said, Eddie, I'm going around the country, I'm interviewing everybody, it's a history of the team. You can do it, you cannot do it. And he goes, all right, let's do it. So I got him for about 30 minutes, 45 minutes on tape, just talking about when he's drafted by the Orioles, how he became a switch hitter, how he became a great player, historic stuff. So, I get that. I get them in Arizona. I go to Las Vegas, I find Steve Barber. All right, we're going back. All right, the Orioles have had over a dozen 20-game winners, great pitching through the years. Steve Barber, the first one. All right, is a